Our featured guest tonight has burst onto the national stage with the band Danger Danger, and from that moment on has been considered by both his fans and peers as one of the greatest guitar talents of his era. From session work to successful solo projects, he has done it all, and there are no signs of him slowing down. Here to chat about his life, career, and the unbelievable story behind his brand new single, I'm in Love, is none other than guitarist Andy Timmons. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Great to be with you. And boy, I got a lot to live up to after that introduction, man.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, you've had one of those long, varied, and accomplished careers that I mean, so many musicians and artists would die for. So I'd
yeah.
kind of like to ask, where did your love of music first start?
I was just in a musical household. My mother and father they had there was a family, Motorola console stereo with a smattering of 50s and 60s records. A lot of the, popular culture stuff, either from folk music or Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. Everybody had that Whipped Cream and Other Delights record. But I had three older brothers. And I'm the youngest. So I was born in 63. And my oldest brother would have been 12 years old when I came into the family. And so he started buying all the British Invasion stuff from 63 forward. So all the Beatles, all the Dave Clark Five, Kinks, Animals, Herman's Hermits, you name it. And so it was just always kind of a rock and roll and guitar centric record collection being formed and collected by my older brothers. And they also had acoustic guitars around the house. So there was all that music. My older brothers, who really very much became my male role models, were hugely influential because music was a huge part of their lives. And so from the cradle for me, that it was the same. So I've always had that affection and inspiration just from the look of the guitar and obviously the sound of the guitar.
And I know we'll come back to this later on in the show, but I understand the Beatles had a massive impact on your early life. And
Well,
I think
yeah,
there's an
yeah.
Ozzy Osbourne quote where he said something about, when he heard the Beatles, it was like all of a sudden he was seeing the world in color. How would
Interesting.
you
Yeah.
describe your experience of discovering the
Well,
Beatles musicians?
it's hard to really, verbalize the meaning because, I was literally in the cradle. So, um, it's never not been in my life, I think is the best way for me to explain it. Because it was happening in real time from my birth, if that makes sense. They hit America in February of 64. So I'm barely, I'm not even a year old, but again, that music is already starting to get into my DNA from my surroundings. And it was always the family's favorite group. And then all my friends growing up, once I started to have my own friend group going to school, the first friend I remember making in first grade he was my Beatle buddy to this day, David Martin. And we go to each other's households on the Saturday and trade the Beatle records that we had been given from our elder siblings. They were handing us down all their 45s that they were tired of. And we're like, yes, this is gold. So I don't remember life without it. And so that's kind of my perspective. It's such a deeply ingrained thing, but it's also, you know, consistently stayed with me. Of course, from as you can witness from my career, I've gone down so many different paths musically, from classical to jazz to pop and heavy, rock, whatever it might be, fusion. I always come back to that music because I almost call it like a security blanket because it's such a part of my being that I can listen to it. And it just makes me feel great. And my analytical musician ears can maybe settle down for a little bit and just let it wash over me. Though I still get in there and deeply analyze every bit about every Beatle record ever. Yeah, so there was no like, oh gosh, there's the Beatles. That's really cool. It was just it always was, if that can, if that makes
At,
any
at what
sense.
point, at what point did you pick up your first guitar, and what exactly brought that moment about?
Well, I again with the brothers around having acoustic instruments, I think my mother recognized my passion, desire for it, and started buying me these little plastic toy guitars. Maybe when I was four, maybe when I was five. There's actually a picture of me on the internet of me on stage with a country band when I was about five, playing that toy plastic guitar. And I remember my brother showed me. Now this is pre Smoke on the Water, but I could play I'm Not Your Stepping Stone by the Monkees on one string, and
Yeah,
so
yep.
that started my path, and I continually kept learning little bits. And when the brothers weren't around as I got older, I'd sneak in the room and try to teach myself the chords that I saw them playing. Or there was even a public television uh, woman in the afternoons teaching guitar for beginners, little D major chords and G major chords. So wherever I could get little bits of information, and then I just started learning on my own. And then, it was 70s rock by the time I was in, 12, 13, and Kiss had come along. There was a band that played simply enough and well enough that, somebody with a, developing ear didn't need a teacher. Once somebody showed me a couple of bar chords in the minor pentatonic scale, I was off and running. And I haven't looked back since, really.
Well, I was born in 67, and for two
All right.
years, I think when I was 10 and 11, I was Ace Frehley for Halloween.
You
You
know,
know,
oddly
the
enough, well,
spaceman
yeah.
with the hot with aluminum foil.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Oddly enough, I never dressed up. There was a group of older guys in the neighborhood that actually did dress up, and they made costumes. They even went down to the local radio station one day and one evening and passed themselves off as Kiss. And girls were driving by and they were getting kisses, and it was crazy. But
Well,
I just wanted to play. I just wanted to be part of that music. And
well,
that was the first concert I ever saw. I was 13 and I saw the Destroyer tour on it was Kiss and Bob Seger, 1976. But that 13-year-old kid in the very last seat of the very back row of Robert Stadium in Evansville, Indiana, seeing this first rock and roll show and knowing this is what I'm going to do. That moment that really did happen. That feeling came over me because I was already playing and I was in my first band. And so this is it, man. I have to do this to be on a stage opening for those guys, whatever it was, 14 years later, is kind of completely inconceivable. I still kind of marvel at that, and never take for granted all the different things I've gotten to do in my career and the amazing people I've played with or gotten to share the stage with. It's been incredible. So
I know Peter Frampton and his music had also been
yeah.
a part of your life and story. Do you remember the first time you heard Frampton come through your speakers? And was it Frampton Comes Alive?
Well, no. So my oldest brother that I mentioned buying all the early '60s stuff, Mark, John was nearest in age, and he's another 4 years younger than he. So 8 years my elder. So he started getting in. He was maybe the Monkees guy, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Love and Spoonful. But then he got into Peter Frampton as early as what is it? Humble Pie, and then all the Frampton's Camel. And there's a record called Frampton that came out right before Frampton Comes Alive. So I was very aware, especially of that record, because I remember listening to it quite a bit. And my brother John had the ubiquitous '68, Volkswagen Beetle that so many of the late '60s, early '70s teenagers had because they were cheap and but yeah, we would drive around. It was some of my favorite moments were listening to music with John in his VW Beetle, and that 8 track is a very fond memory. So then when Frampton Comes Alive came out, I knew Show Me the Way. I knew some of these songs, but then of course they, in front of a live audience and just an even brighter spirit about it. And it was clear, and so that music is deeply ingrained in me as well. And so over the years, it became very apparent that, several things. Not only was Peter a highly underrated guitar player, but that his way of writing, his way of conceiving melody is uniquely his instincts when he's either writing or whether he's improvising. It's a very, there's nobody that really does things the way he does. It's really, really, unique, and it's really great that he's still out there doing it after all these years. Obviously, he's got some physical challenges at this point in his life, but he's still out doing it when he can on a very, very, very high level. So,
And you've also spoken about your love and the influence of Montrose on your younger
oh
self. Do
my
you remember the
gosh,
first
yeah,
time you heard Montrose and what stood
yeah.
out to you about their sound that made you
That
fall in love?
Yeah, that it was just the guitar sound and Sammy Hagar's vocals. That's I think it's 1973. I think that record that we're referencing came out with Bad Motor Scooter, Rock the Nation, every song on there. Space Station Number 5. Um, it just the sound of the guitar, the whole band sounds great. It's just a great, great, great rock record. And as it turns out, I learned years later that it was Don Landy and Ted Templeman, which was pretty much the team that made the first Van Halen records. Same team already in place for 1973, and it's there, man. And Ronnie's playing is so great. The tone is so beautiful, and it's just so articulate, and just very visceral. So that I mean, for years, especially when I was doing my first club gigs and whatnot, growing up, that was always my, you know, when I'm getting ready to leave the house to go do the show, I was always cranking the first Montrose record. That nothing would get my blood going like that record. And I still love it. It's still top 5 heavy rock record for me, for sure.